all of you know there are three different steps. What is the first step? First step is digestion. Second one is distillation, and third one is the titration part. Is it not? Everyone can understand or everyone can recollect that thing? Digestion, distillation, and titration. Now, digestion part, if everyone should remember, because you are going to appear for the practical examinations, there also you will be asked some practical based questions, so which you have to write the answer. So in the digestion part, what is happening whenever you are taking any feed which contains the protein? So what you have to do first, it is to be digested. So digested means how it is to be digested. It is to be digested in presence of sulfuric acid. You have to add concentrated sulfuric acid. Then you have to add some digestion mixture. What for this digestion mixture is added and what is its composition? Digestion mixture does contain sodium sulfate and copper sulfate, or potassium sulfate and copper sulfate. What is the ratio for that one? 9:1. That means 1 part will be copper sulfate and 9 part will be the sodium sulfate. So that digestion mixture plus feed plus concentrated sulfuric acid. Now question will be there, what for we usually add this digestion mixture? Digestion mixture actually increase the boiling temperature so that the feed can be digested at the earliest. Without digestion mixture also feed can be digested, but it will take longer time. Just to make it a little bit faster, we usually add this digestion mixture. So this digestion mixture, generally 6 to 8 gram of digestion mixture is added. Okay, so once you are taking these three things, feed, concentrated sulfuric acid and digestion mixture, then you are digesting it by putting it over the heater. It will take around 2 hours time. So it will be a very clear solution. There will be no carbon particles. So that digested samples, what does it contain? You know, if you are taking that feed which contains some nitrogen, that nitrogen in presence of this sulfuric acid, it will be producing or it will be making it as a ammonium sulfate. So in the digested feed, ammonium sulfate is there. You should remember these things. Ammonium sulfate will be there in the digested feed. So that digested samples needs to be distilled in presence of alkali. You have to take 40% sodium hydroxide and 10 ml of these digested samples. Then what you have to do, once you are taking these things in the microcellular feed and nitrogen assembly, there what will happen, that ammonium sulfate what is there in the digested sample, once it is mixing with sodium hydroxide, ammonia will start releasing. So that ammonia is again absorbed in boric acid indicator. Question generally asked both in theory and practical also sometimes, that for the absorption of that liberated ammonia, boric acid indicator is used. What is the other name of that boric acid indicator? Other name of boric acid indicator is known as Tasirose indicator. Tasiro, T-A-S-H-I-R-O apostrophe S, Tasirose indicator. What does it contain? It contains methyl red, one indicator, another one is the bromocresol green. So bromocresol green and methyl red, this is the combination of that two indicators which is known as Tasirose indicator, that is to be added in 2% boric acid solutions. So these 2% boric acid solutions with this Tasirose indicator, it gives slightly pinkish coloration. So that boric acid indicator, once it is absorbing that ammonia during the distillation process, it will be changing its color and it will be turned to pink to green color or blue color, you can say. So ultimately what you have got now, ammonia, you have taken it in that boric acid indicator as ammonium borate. That is the second part is over. Third part is the titration part. Now that nitrogen needs to be titrated against standard acid. That standard acid, maybe standard nitric acid also you can take the standard sulfuric acid also, but generally we usually use this standard sulfuric acid. Once you are asked standard sulfuric acid and sulfuric acid, what is the difference in sulfuric acid and standard sulfuric acid? Sulfuric acid, once I am talking there, you may not be knowing what is its strength, but once I am talking about the standard sulfuric acid, it does have some strength. Suppose if I am telling N by 10 sulfuric acid, that means N stands for normal. So normal solutions divided by 10, N by 10 sulfuric acids. So you have to titrate it against the standard sulfuric acids, and you have to again get back the color as pinkish colorations. So that will be the end point of your titration. So these three steps are over. So you will be getting the value that how much N by 10 sulfuric acid is used to complete the titration process or to get the titration end point. So this is the three simple steps you have to do in the laboratory. Then you will get the value of this N by 10 sulfuric acid used. Now, the question is that how to calculate out what is the nitrogen content first. Here, one thing one have to remember, crude protein percentage is not found directly. First of all, you have to get the nitrogen percentage, then it is to be multiplied by 6.25. That is the factor. What for that factor is used? Considering that thing, that 100 gram protein does contain 16 gram of nitrogen. So 16% nitrogen means 16 grams of nitrogen present in 100 gram of protein. So 1 gram nitrogen is present in 100 divided by 16, it is coming 6.25. Generally, the factor 6.25 is used to find out the crude protein percentage in any given feed samples. Now, how, if you can remember, you can the particular formula, what is written over there, that in the numerator part, that is the volume of N by 10 sulfuric acid used multiplied by volume prepared from the digested samples. If you are preparing 250 ml of digested samples, in the first step, you have to multiply by 250. Then what you have to do, you have to put one factor. That what is that factor and how to calculate out, I will tell you after some time. So volume of N by 10 sulfuric acid used into 250, that is the total volume prepared from the digested samples, multiplied by factor into 6.25. Whatever nitrogen you are going to get, it is to be multiplied by 6.25 into 100, just to make it as a percentage, 100, divided by, that is the volume of this digested sample taken for the distillation. I told you that 10 ml of digested samples needs to be taken in that general assembly. So divided by 10, then multiplied by quantity of feed taken for the digestions. If you are taking 1 gram feed samples, you have to put 1 gram. So 10 into 1. And in the numerator part, there I have told volume of N by 10 sulfuric acid used to get that end point. If it is 10 ml, so you have to write 10 into 250 into factor. That factor is like that. You have to remember 1 ml of 1 normal sulfuric acid can neutralize 14 milligram of nitrogen. What is that? 1 ml 1 normal sulfuric acid can neutralize 14 milligram of nitrogen. So if you just convert this milligram of nitrogen to gram nitrogen, how much you will get? 14 divided by 1000. So you will be getting 0.014 gram. So that is for 1 ml 1 normal sulfuric acid. So if you are taking N by 10, so in that case, what will be the factor? So that factor will be 0.014 divided by 10. So that means it will be 0.0014. So depending upon that volume used for the getting that end point, if you are getting 10 ml, so in that case you have to put that one I mean, if you are getting that one, if you are using n by 100, in that case, how much it will be there? 0.014 divided by 100. That means it will be 0.0014 factor will be there. So the factor is generally changed. Simply, you have to remember 1 ml, 1 normal sulfuric acid can neutralize 14 milligram nitrogen. That milligram of nitrogen to be converted to gram. Then from there, you have to find out what is the factor. So you got volume of sulfuric acid used, N by 10 sulfuric acid used, multiplied by this one 250 ml, that is the total volume made from the digested samples, into 0.0014 if you are adding this N by 10 sulfuric acid, into 6.25 to get it, that's crude protein, into 100 if you are divided by 10 into 1 gram, that is the quantity of feed taken for the digestions. So this is the total calculation for getting the crude protein percentage in any animal feed. Now you just tell me that where is the problem? Ojukum, saccharides. So if the structural polysaccharides is more, we can easily say that fiber contents are more. And nowadays people used to take some fiber-rich food stuff. I mean, doctor usually prescribe these things. Go for eating oats. Oat does contain very good fiber. Instead of going for maida, you should take the whole grain atta. What for that whole grain atta is consumed? Because it does contain very good quantity of fiber. So what is the role of the fiber in our body? Whenever we are taking fiber in required quantity, in that case, it helps to prevent the constipations. In that case, even the colon cancer type of disease can also be avoided if you are taking required quantity of fiber. That is one part. And second part is that it again hinders the absorption of maximum quantities of cholesterol. So cholesterol absorption also can be hindered by this fiber content. So this crude fiber is not generally digested in required quantity by human being as well as non-dominant species because of the structural polysaccharides. Whereas whenever we are taking any cereal grain, let it be rice. This is our staple food. Rice we are taking. Rice, what does it contain? That does contain starch. So this starch is a nitrogen-free extract. That means it's a soluble carbohydrate. It is easily digestible. So whenever you are practicing these different proximate principles, it is generally assumed that crude fiber should have less digestibility and nitrogen-free extract should have more digestibility. But if there are some error in the proximate principles analysis, in that case, you may find that digestibility of NFE is less as compared to the digestibility of crude fiber. Because if you can remember the crude fiber estimations, we usually screen it, we usually filter it to the muslin cloth. So that type of, if some error is there, you may find that crude fiber digestibility will be more as compared to the nitrogen-free extract. Just to overcome these particular situations, or just to correct these particular flaws in proximate principles analysis, Van Soest has developed this fiber fractions analysis. What is this fiber fractions analysis? There are mostly three important fractions of the fiber or carbohydrate component of the fiber. So what is that one? One is the neutral detergent fiber, another one is the acid detergent fiber, and third one is the acid detergent lignin. These are the three components. As this PowerPoint presentation is not here, simply you can remember whenever you will be treating the feed with this neutral detergent solution, what will happen? Some quantity of nutrients is going to be dissolved in the neutral detergent solutions, that will be termed as neutral detergent soluble. Most of the soluble carbohydrate, soluble protein, everything will be dissolved in the neutral detergent. So that is termed the neutral detergent soluble. The portion which will be there and which is not dissolved in the neutral detergent solutions, that is known as neutral detergent fiber. So you should note down neutral detergent fiber is equal to cellulose, hemicellulose plus lignin. So cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, these are the major component of neutral detergent fiber. Again, when it is treated with acid detergent solutions, in that case, what will happen? Hemicellulose get dissolved in that acid detergent solutions, and you will be getting acid detergent fiber. So that acid detergent fiber is nothing but the combination of cellulose and lignin. So the difference between NDF and ADF is that NDF does contain three components, major components: cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. And acid detergent fiber does contain cellulose and lignin. So sometimes you may get the questions, if you deduct ADF from the NDFs, that means NDF minus ADF, what particular this one carbohydrate component will get? Definitely it will be hemicellulose only, because NDF contains cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin. ADF contains cellulose and lignin. So NDF minus ADF is equal to hemicellulose. Then after that, whatever fiber is there, if you treat it with 70% sulfuric acid, there also you can separate out the this one acid insoluble as mineral matter, plus you may separate out the lignin. So for that you have to treat it with 70% sulfuric acid. So you'll be getting the acid detergent lignin. So you should remember three important things: what is NDF, what is ADF, and what is the acid detergent lignin. So that much is more than sufficient to know. Any questions regarding this one, Prem? Prem? You have to, what you are asking? No, what is the significance? Definitely you have studied in the carbohydrate fractions. Na? What is this cellulose? What is this hemicellulose and what is this lignin? Do you know these things? Cellulose, I told you in the Saturday class also, cellulose and hemicellulose, that is coming under the polysaccharide, is it not? In that, cellulose is coming under the homopolysaccharide category because it is the only glucose unit which is attached by glycosides linkage. The major problem is that here the linkage is beta 1,4 glycosidic linkage. That's why the mammalian enzymes cannot digest these things. And whereas the hemicellulose is a combination of different monosaccharide units. It's not only the single glucose. You'll be getting fructose, you'll be getting xylose, you will be getting arabinose. This hemicellulose is a heteropolysaccharides because there are combination of different monosaccharide units. And lignin, each and every student should remember that thing. This lignin is not a carbohydrate, though we usually discuss this lignin along with the cellulose, hemicellulose, because when the plant matures, it generally combined with this cellulose. So you'll be getting cellulose lignin complex, you'll be getting cellulose hemicellulose lignin complex, and the quantity of this lignin actually determines its digestibility. If the lignin content is very high, it is not going to be digestible by the animals. So particularly I'm talking about the ruminant species. So if the plant matures, it's very difficult to digest because of the high quantity of lignin. But having said that, you should not think that lignin is a carbohydrate. Very frequently asked questions whether lignin is a carbohydrate or something else. Yes, it is not a carbohydrate. I am just telling it very boldly. Lignin is not a carbohydrate. It's a phenylpropane derivative. So what is this phenylpropane derivative? So there are three different alcohols present in this lignin. One is the synapyl alcohol, another one is the coumaryl alcohol, another one is the coniferyl alcohol. So lignin is a phenylpropane derivative, and the precursor of this lignin is phenylalanine. That's an amino acid. So these things only, if you can remember, that is more than sufficient. Anything else? Tannin, you know, tannin is an anti-nutritional factor. What do you mean by anti-nutritional factors? Which is also known as plant metabolites, plant secondary metabolites. You know, every living species, whether it's plant or animal, they do have their own defensive mechanisms against anything. So these plant secondary metabolites, basically the anti-nutritional factors which are present in the commonly available feeds and fodder which are generally fed to the animal. So this tannin again is a phenolic compound which is present in most of the tree leaves, jungle forest, banana, mango seed kernel. This tannin is present, which is also known as tannic acid. There are two types of tannin. One is condensed tannin, one is the hydrolyzable tannin. So this tannin, you know, when it is present at very lower level, it's very beneficial for the ruminant species. If you can remember the protein protections, very low quantity of tannin, when it is combining with the protein, it can protect the protein from the ruminal degradation. But very high quantity of tannin, it generally hampers the utilization of protein. As it is hampering the utilization of protein, that's why it is termed as anti-nutritional factor. And if the tannin content is very high, you will be getting puckery sensations. Have you ever tried that betel nut? Have you taken that betel nut? Betel nut does contain very good quantity of tannin, and for that reason, whenever you will be chewing that particular this betel nut, you will be getting the puckery sensations. Even this banana leaf, it does contain very high quantity of tannin. Mango seed kernel, sal seed meal, these are the different animal feed which does contain tannin. So tannin is basically, it's a anti-nutritional factor. Is it clear? Anything else? Anything else? You're getting practical? All of you could understand the ration formulation for ruminants, poultry and swine. Have you gone through your practical manuals?
Sir, please discuss ration formulation of poultry.
Which one?
Ration formulation of poultry, sir.
Ration formulation of poultry. You have the manual with you? Do you have the manual with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you see right now that this ration preparation, that I cannot, if I'm just simply verbally telling that thing, you may not be understanding that thing. I have to show it that the different steps one time. So in that case, if you are thinking that one revision class for the ruminant ration formulation, poultry ration formulation and pig ration formulation needs to be taken. So tomorrow I can take the class for just revision of that ration formulation and the nutritive value. In 1 hour, I will be showing you how to do these things again. Already it is taught to you. So if you think that there should be a practical class, then only I'll take the class. Otherwise, the classes number will be very less, because you know you are going to appear for the examination from 5th onward. Is it okay? Do you think that there should be a practical class tomorrow? How many of you are wishing to attend the class?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So if you think like that, I can take the class tomorrow for 1 hour just to show again. Definitely, most of the things are already known to you. Only if there is any confusion in any steps, tomorrow I'll be showing these things by showing some slide. Then only you will be able to understand. If I am just telling it right now, it may not be understandable to you. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Okay, now just as I was just continuing that protein nutrition and carbohydrate nutrition already I have told you. Just important point what you have to remember for your, this one theory examination. That one also, let me finish that one. Another yes, 20 minutes are there. I will finishing very hurriedly. What are the things you have to remember for that one? Yes, someone wants to say something. Nada, you want to say something?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. You have raised a hand for that tomorrow's practical one, is it not?
Okay. Ration formation one, sir.
Yeah, tomorrow I'll be showing that, taking that class for 1 hour for all these 3 ration formulations. The important point, what is to be remembered while you will be preparing the rations, what are the important thing you have to remember, I will be telling that things, because that is going to be there in your paper 2. And paper 1 also, as I have told, it will be 40 marks practical based questions and 20 marks will be the viva. So in the practical based questions, you may have to what you can say, identify some of the equipment also. That will be in the question paper. So suppose you may get the picture of the hot air oven. So you have to identify what is hot air oven, how it looks like. Then you may find one particular, let it be conical flask. That conical flask picture will be there. Simply what you have to do, you have to identify that whether that is a conical flask or volumetric flask or something else. You have to write the name and uses also. So all these things, it is only possible if you are going through the different chapters of the manuals of these 2 paper. Okay. And another thing also will be there in your paper 1, that is the calculation of nutritive ratio. Calculation of nutritive ratio means how to find out the digestible nutrients from the digestibility trial. It's a very simple calculation. The people generally do some silly mistake in calculation of that digestible nutrients, even the total digestible nutrient also. If you are doing something wrong in calculation part, definitely the total digestible nutrient, nutritive ratio, all these things will be getting erroneous result. So basic concept or the understanding of how to calculate out the digestible nutrients, that has to be find out first, then only you will be able to answer that nutritive value. Is it okay? So today, what you will do, you will be going through that manuals, whatever has been taught. So tomorrow when I will be discussing these things, if you have any specific point to ask or discuss, I will be telling that things. Okay, so we just wait for 1 minute. Let me show that particular important things regarding the protein nutrition. So is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
So here just I wanted to tell on that day also, because of time constraint I could not finish that one. Here, what is the difference between the ruminant and non-ruminant protein digestion? Ruminants and non-ruminants means ruminants species, they do have the rumen in their digestive tract, and that's a very unique chamber, you know these things. Because of that rumen only, they can do so many things what non-ruminants including human being also cannot do these things. What is that specialty? That ruminant species having the unique capability that they can utilize non-protein nitrogenous compounds to get it converted as microbial protein. That's a very, very unique things found in case of ruminant species. If I am telling you there is no fish, no egg, no meat, no soybean, nothing is there. Can you take some quantity of urea and can you utilize it for your protein synthesis? You cannot do these things. But ruminants, they can do these things because of that particular unique capability to convert it to microbial protein. So for non-ruminant species, whenever you are taking any proteinous feed, that get digested first in stomach, then in the intestine part by different enzymes secreted by the pancreas and the small intestines. Then ultimately you will be getting amino acids. That amino acids are going to be absorbed in the small intestine, and it will be in the blood circulations for different functions. It may be utilized for the synthesis of muscle protein. It may be utilized for some other purpose also, like the glucose synthesis. There are so many functions performed by the amino acids. But what about the ruminant species? In ruminant species, it is somewhat different. What is the difference? Here, you may get the questions that what is crude protein? You have to remember crude protein is a combination of true protein plus non-protein nitrogenous compound. So true protein, basically whatever you have read in biochemistry, basically you have read the true protein as a polypeptide chain wherein the amino acids get linked with the peptide linkages. So it's a chain of amino acids linked by peptide linkages. That is actually the true protein. But whenever you are taking a food, suppose if you are taking soybean does not only contain the true protein, along with that some non-protein nitrogenous compound is also there. Now, in case of ruminant species, what is happening? When this true protein and non-protein nitrogenous compound both in combination taken by that animal, it is going to be there in the rumen. But you should remember that almost all the protein, crude protein, what the animal has been consumed, it is going to be there in the rumen. Some amount of protein is going to escape that ruminal degradation, and it will be available in the small intestine for the enzymatic digestion. That means whatever enzymes are secreted by the small intestine and pancreas, that is also there in case of ruminant species. But in between, in the rumen, there are some changes about that particular protein molecules. So what will happen? That 60% of that particular protein, what has been consumed, that will be degraded to peptides, then from amino acids, peptides to amino acids. That amino acids again, day before yesterday I was talking about the de-amino acids reactions. There also I told you, once the ammonia is released from that amino acids, there will be formation of the keto acids. So that keto acids is going to provide the carbon skeleton, and ammonia, NH3. So ammonia will be providing nitrogen, and here there are keto acids, means there will be carbon molecules also in the keto acids. So that is going to provide the carbon skeleton, and ammonia is going to provide the nitrogen skeleton. Once the bacteria get this carbon and nitrogen from the keto acids and ammonia, they can synthesize their own protein. That protein is known as microbial protein. And for that, definitely they need some energy. That energy is coming from the digestion of carbohydrate. I told you that when there is a digestion of carbohydrate in case of ruminant species, it is not the glucose which is produced, it is the volatile fatty acids. And in case of ruminant species, the major source of energy is the volatile fatty acids. Other than that, definitely fat and protein also provides the energy, but mostly it is coming from the volatile fatty acids. So with the help of carbon skeleton and nitrogen skeleton and the energy, the microbes, specifically I'm talking about the bacteria, rumen bacteria, they are capable enough to produce the protein which is known as microbial protein. But in case of non-ruminant species, I mean poultry, swine, there is no question of production of microbial protein because they do not have the rumen. So in case of ruminant species, so in between there is a production of microbial protein from the feed protein what has been consumed. So this microbial protein, basically it is reaching to the small intestine. For ruminant species, it is the protein after digestion in the stomach, it is reaching to the small intestine. But in case of ruminant species, it is the microbial protein which is reaching to the small intestine. Once that microbial protein is reached there at the small intestine, at the same time some quantity of protein which has escaped the ruminal degradation. That's why it is termed as escape protein. So both these two forms of protein will be available in the small intestine, and there all the enzymes which are there in case of non-ruminant species, same Enzymes are also there in case of ruminant species. And here there will be action of the enzymes secreted by the pancreas and small intestine. And here the microbial protein is going to be digested, amino acid is going to be liberated, again it is going to be absorbed. So this is the basic difference between the non-ruminant and ruminant species regarding the protein digestion. In case of ruminant species, in between there is production of microbial protein. Now for that reason, as I have told, ruminants have the unique capability to utilize the non-protein nitrogenous compound. Suppose here, as I have told, you are giving crude protein, where crude protein is also there, NPN is also there. But if you are not giving this true protein, simply you are giving NPN in the form of urea. So urea, that is CONH2 called twice, that is a NPN compound or non-protein nitrogenous compound. If you are giving that one also, in that case, what will happen? This urea, once it is hydrolyzed, there will be production of ammonia and carbon dioxide. Now, ammonia, which will be the precursor for nitrogen skeleton, but microbes, they do need the carbon skeleton also. So in that case, what will be required? They will be requiring the carbon skeleton. How they are going to get the carbon skeleton? They will be getting the carbon skeleton from the carbohydrate. That's why whenever you will be offering the urea, you have to provide some soluble carbohydrate in the form of either molasses or in the form of starch. So starch and molasses, when get digested in the rumen, that will be providing these keto acids, that will be the source of carbon skeleton. So that's why question is generally asked that how much quantity of soluble carbohydrate is required for the utilization of urea optimally. It is the ratio 1:10. Very frequently asked questions that for 100 gram urea, you have to provide 1 kg of digestible carbohydrate in the form of either starch or molasses. Molasses is a very good source of soluble carbohydrate. So in that case, what will happen? Ultimately, that urea can also be utilized to produce this microbial protein. So that way, it is ruminant species have the unique capability to synthesize this microbial protein from the urea also. Now I am not doing these things. This is already discussed, microbial protein and escape protein. So by escape protein and bypass protein, both are same, which is not degraded in the rumen, but it will be available in the small intestine for the enzymatic hydrolysis. Because some of the animals, they need some more quantity of amino acids. For the animals which is producing 4 to 6 liters of milk, for them, they may not be requiring very good quantity of essential amino acids. But for high yielding animals which is producing more than 15 liters of milk, for them they need very high quantity of amino acids. But if that particular protein, what we are going to offer to that high yielding animals, if it is degraded in the rumen, it is going to be produced that microbial protein. So microbial protein amino acid composition, it is almost similar. So what you have to do, you have to provide some quantity of protein in terms of bypass protein. That means it should escape the ruminal degradation, so that once it is reaching to the small intestine, it will be enzymatically hydrolyzed and more amino acids of desired quantity will be available. So this bypass protein technology is very much in practice in Gujarat, Maharashtra, then Punjab and Haryana, where very good number of high-yielding animals are being reared by the farmers. And that bypass protein is very important for them just to maintain the very high quantity of milk productions. So that bypass protein also, you have to remember what is bypass protein. So this one already I have told you. Then very frequently asked questions about this one, different methods for determining the protein quality in non-ruminants. So all these things I may not be in a position to complete it, but you have to read it out very carefully, all these different methods. Sometimes you may get broad type of questions also, that different methods to check the protein quality non-luminance. One is the protein efficiency ratio, second one is the net protein retention, gross protein value, biological value, then this one, net protein utilization, net protein value, chemical score, essential amino acid index, chemical methods, dye binding methods, microbial assay. So these are the different methods to determine the quality of proteins in non-luminance. This class already have been taught, I think. So if you have any query regarding any particular method, I can discuss that thing because time is very less. Any particular query regarding that protein evaluation method? Any query regarding this one? Students, do you have any query? Hello?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, can you please explain that feeding during scarcity?
Feeding during scarcity.
Yes, sir.
Feeding, that is different chapters. Feeding during scarcity, if I'm asking you that feeding during scarcity, in that case, definitely you have to find out some alternative feed resources. You know, during that time, definitely you will not be finding the conventional feed ingredients like that concentrated mixture or concentrated ingredient like that protein-rich ingredient. Then this one, I mean, energy-rich ingredient. So energy ingredients are that maize, wheat, barley, wheat bran, rice bran. These are the cereal byproducts. Then soybean meal, groundnut cake. All these things may not be available during the scarcity period. It may be, drought conditions. It may be flood conditions. That particular conditions, what you have to feed to the animals. So that is the feeding of animals during scarcity period. So there are several ways and methods to feed the animal during scarcity period. Mostly it is the urea based formula. As I have told, the ruminant species have the unique capability to utilize this urea, and that can be converted to microbial protein. There are several formula which is available by incorporating the urea. You can prepare the urea mineral molasses block. You can prepare the uromol. So along with that urea mineral millimisters, uromol, if you have some quantity of dry roughage, that particular dry roughage along with this urea based formula, you can offer to the animals. You can improve the jungle grass which is available during the scarcity period, that can be used by improving its nutritive value. There are several means also. I think it is already taught to you that how to improve the nutritive value of these jungle grasses, straws, and that type of feed actually it is to be offered to the animals, because the conventional feed ingredients like that green fodder, leguminous fodder, all these things will not be available during the flood and drought conditions. So that type of feeding is to be given. So for that actually one more class is required to discuss those things in details. Anything else? Time is very less. It's already 1:56. Anything? Anything you want to ask, student? Hello? 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 So anyhow, it's already 2 o'clock. I think you have the microbiology class also. You just go for attending that thing. So you will let me know that whether you want to appear, attend that tomorrow's practical class at 2 o'clock or not through your WhatsApp group. You can send me my personal these things also, so that I can take the class tomorrow for the practicals. Okay.